Okay, so welcome today. It's really fantastic to have you with me, and welcome to Never Miss a Beat as a leader in crisis. And I think it's such an interesting topic to have with regards to understanding really what a crisis is and how a crisis might actually affect how we work as leaders and how we actually are able to then essentially motivate our staff, be able to make sure that our staff are able to do the work that they're supposed to do. And I think it would be a very fair thing to say that, there's been absolutely unprecedented situation with regards to this. I mean, I've never, ever been in my situation in my life, ever seen anything like this, as I'm sure neither have you. And it's really scary to just think that there you are going across your life or down your life and everything's really well. And suddenly you wake up, like, for example, you go to bed one night thinking all is good, and you wake up the next day realizing actually all is not good. And at the end of the day, what's really scary is that the world will never be the same again. And I think all of us have experienced exactly that same situation. So I really wanted to run these 4 webinars because I felt it was really important with all of the people who we deal with and we have contact with, just to talk a little bit about what is going on and maybe what are those things that you can be doing differently in terms of leading your people. So what I thought we would start off with today, so what are we going to do today? What are the outcomes of today besides the wrap-up sitting there on its own at the very bottom? Essentially, we're going to talk about the light at the end of the tunnel. And when I'm talking about that, what I'm really saying is obviously this situation cannot last forever. And I think that's a really great thing. COVID-19 cannot last indefinitely. And I have no doubt that the scientists will be able to solve the problem in hopefully not too distant the future, because it's really scary in terms of the number of people getting sick. And also I think how prolific COVID-19 is and how we just don't know anything about it. And also the fact that it's actually a faceless enemy. I mean, that's really scary, right? The other thing I wanted to talk a little bit more about today as well was the issue around being calm and agile and flexible. And there's a lot of research around calm or remaining calm in the face of absolute adversity. And I'm going to share a case study with you a little bit later on in the show or in the webinar, talking about how calm will always win at the end of the day. So talk a little bit about those 3 things and why they are particularly critical in leadership in today's world. I always fall back on my favorite, the positive attitude. I think it's very, very easy right now to fall back into a negative attitude and, that sort of doomsday, the world will never be the same and it's a really crappy experience, and yes, it is. But I think if we can try and reframe it in our minds and see it differently and be positive about what we can learn from this obviously really difficult situation, essentially we will come out the other end better people and certainly better leaders or better team members. So I think it's really important to start thinking about having a positive attitude. And somebody said to me yesterday, well, what's the point of being positive? It is all doom and gloom. I think the most important thing about in being in life really, and certainly in a leadership role if you are, or a team role, because you actually influence each other in some way, being positive is absolutely wonderful, and it's a very energetic and a really good force to have around us. So we'll talk a little bit more about that just now. I want to just bring in one of my favorite topics, different personality types of leaders moving forward. People often ask me about personality types and, if you're introverted, are you a more successful leader in crisis? Or if you're extroverted, does it mean that you're able to remain more calm when the chips are down? So I thought I'd bring this in not only obviously as a little bit of fun, but also to talk a little bit about what different personality types might look like in crisis. And not necessarily only devoted to leadership. It could be anybody really, but I think I'm obviously going to refer to today's leadership because that's what we're discussing in terms of a crisis and what we're living through at the moment. And then pulling it all together. So what does that mean? When we've learned these things and we've thought about some of the things I'm talking about with you today, and obviously I can't talk about everything because it's only an hour, but how can we pull this all together? And what can we learn from COVID-19? What can we do differently in the future? I really, really think that it's so strange, living in Australia, that if you remember, we started the year with those horrific bushfires, which I was so distressed about, and I'm sure we all were. And then there were floods after that in Manly, etc., etc. And now we've got the coronavirus. And I just think to myself, like, when does it stop? And I'm sure all of us are thinking that way. So maybe it won't stop. Maybe it's more around how we respond to situations and how we learn from these things so that we can do things better and be better people and be better team members and be better leaders. Because I do truthfully believe that the world has changed and will never be the same again. And then obviously I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe how we can help you and then wrap it up. So let's swing into it. We've got an hour only, and it's really welcome to have you with me here today. I'm so happy you're with me. Just a little bit about me. I won't bore you with the details, but I think it's always important for people to know why people running webinars have the background to do so. It's easy to sort of say, well, come and listen to a webinar, but I think if you're going to run a webinar, you've got to have some credentials or some experience around it. So for most of you who are on the line, or some of you on the line, know a little bit about me. There are a lot of you. Some of you I have met, which is a real pleasure. I work in Africa, Australia, and Fiji, and do lots of work around leadership, team development, executive coaching, and, you know, women. I like working with women, etc., etc. So I guess really the question today is, would you like to be able to ride this wave of uncertainty with ease and confidence? And maybe that's a little bit unfair for me to ask you, would you be able to ride it with ease? I mean, I think ease makes it sound easy. It's not easy. But would you be able to actually ride this wave with some sense of certainty that you know what you're doing, you believe that you've got control of what's going on around you and your people who are working at home, you feel some center of kind of, you know, gravity towards your own life and feel as if you will actually come out of this more confident, and at least you feel as if your life is not out of control. Would you like to have your people be productive from home in these difficult times? It was really interesting. Somebody sent me an email yesterday and I said to him, oh, what are you doing at the moment? He said, oh, I'm working from home. And I said, oh, that's fantastic. So tell me how you're finding working from home. And he said, well, you know, I'm cleaning out the garage and I'm washing out the back deck. And I said to him, well, that's wonderful, because that is working in one way. He's working and doing his home duties. And I said, well, what about the office work? And he said, well, I'm fitting them all in together. And, you know, I'm realizing that if I can do something at home for the hour that I would normally have at lunch at work, I can maybe clean up the back, you know, garden or shed. And I really sort of thought to myself, was that a good idea or not? And I realized that if he was doing that, he's obviously very productive and very efficient in what he's doing, as long as ultimately and obviously the work becomes first and the shed and the garage, you know, are secondary. But I think it is about, you know, how would you be able to have your people be more productive from home in these difficult times? And moving forward as well, do you see that we would have a much more remote workforce? I mean, is this the beginning of a whole new way of working? Will things change in the future? You know, what's going to be different? Would you like to be able to still get things done and on time right now, even though you're working remotely and from all over the place? Are you still getting reports on time from your people? Do you see that they're doing the things that they're supposed to be doing? Or is it still trial and error because we've never really been done, you know, in this way before? Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, it's really interesting because there's many organizations that work remotely and have been doing for a significant amount of time. So there's some areas, for example, of Coca-Cola, for example, where some of the people work remotely and then just send in their reports, and they will be able to do their phone calls from home and log their calls, etc., and are highly productive. So I think that when I talk about working from home, I think for most organizations it's new, but I think for many it's something that they've been doing for a long time. And I honestly believe that the remote person or the remote learning or the remote training or the remote, you know, productivity from home is going to be a thing of the future. And I think it's only been inspired by COVID-19. Would you like to still have a highly performing team, no matter what the situation? And for those of you who know me, I talk a lot about this particular issue. And I was in Fiji training 2 weeks ago, just before COVID-19 hit, and I was talking a lot about the fact that one of the key roles of leadership, and it's a really, really important one, is that we need to every day, our main focus should be on creating highly performing teams around and under us. So people who know what their job is, they know what their KPIs are, they're accountable, they're responsible. When they send in a report, a top quality, really well written report, it's not sloppy with badly spelled words and sort of sent in 2 or 3 days later. That's exactly what you don't want. So I'm of the very strong opinion that in leadership, it is about making sure that the people who work with you and under you know exactly what they're supposed to do and get that thing in on time with an exemplary approach. Everything's done well. You know that you can trust that person. You know that they will do a job well. And I really believe that that should be probably the key role of every leader around this planet. Why? Because if you have a highly performing team, no matter where they are or no matter where you are, you know that they will come through for you. And so we talk a lot about the more highly performing your team is and the more able they are to do their job, and without you checking on them all the time. I see a lot of micromanagement, by the way. If you've got a team that's autonomous and capable and energetic, it doesn't matter whether COVID-19 is here, because they're going to be able to do what you ask them to do in the first place. It's when we allow teams to do things, late or not properly, and we create and allow over time a team culture of mediocrity that we get into trouble. So it's a critical role of leadership moving forward. And would you like to learn about yourself and your team during a crisis like this? I mean, we've never had this before. So how are you feeling about this? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling kind of in control? Are you feeling distressed? Are you feeling agitated? It's a really interesting thing to start thinking about. How am I? How does this thing affect me? How does it affect my family? How does it affect my people? And I think the more we learn these kind of things about ourselves through crisis or through elements of adversity, I think the more self-aware we become. I ultimately believe the better we are off as people who have a greater sense of awareness and insight. A little bit about me. I won't bore the details. Just somebody asked me, could I actually put up some of the things that I've been doing? So I won't bore you. I have a master's in counseling. I've got a BA communication psychology, lots of lecturing. I've dedicated my life to relationships, leadership, and actually women. I forgot to put women there. I've been doing executive coaching, international leadership, and doing a lot of conference speaking for many, many years. So that's just a little bit about me, but I'm sure most of you know that anyway. Well, there you go. You can see I obviously need to get my animation right. I think the problem many of us have is when things get difficult, as they have, often I think we panic, and some of us feel frozen, and we want to pull our hair out. I was speaking to somebody last week, Friday, and she's a client of mine, and she said to me, I just feel so stuck, Karen. And I said to her, what are you stuck about? And she said, well, I don't know what to do. I'm scared to go out of the house, which is fine. We're not supposed to. I feel inadequate. I feel stupid as a leader. I feel out of control of my job. I feel as if my team don't know what's going on. I feel disconnected. And I remember sitting there with her and saying, okay, let's just take a deep breath and let's just stop. Let's really think about what is it that we need to do. And I think when times of adversity comes and we feel out of control, and I think it really is an issue of control, and that does not mean, ladies and gentlemen, that we are control freaks, but we just don't feel in control, that often we feel off balance. We feel agitated, we feel panicky. And I think the most important thing in any crisis, no matter which crisis it is to just remain as calm as we possibly can. The first thing to do is to keep your cool. Now, particularly as a leader, but also as a team member, we talk about, in my world, we talk about 3 minds. We talk about the reasonable, rational mind, so 1 and 1 is 2. We talk about the emotional mind, which is how we feel about things and how we interpret our emotions, and often how our emotions drive our decisions. And very much of that is tied into the concept of emotional intelligence. But then we talk about the wise mind. And the wise mind really is, okay, you'll be able to say to yourself, right, I feel my logic tells me this, my emotional mind tells me that. But actually, I'm going to bring them both together. I'm going to take a 10-minute break for a walk or a coffee, and then I'm going to bring my emotions and my rationale together, and I'm going to make a wise decision. And I think it's a really important point for all of us to do. The worst kind of leader to have, and I'm sure we've all had these experiences, is the leader who's panic-stricken, and the leader who's agitated, and the leader who starts to scream, do this, do that, do this, do that. I think we all look to our leaders as people who we want to follow. And we know from so much research and so much study that the leader who is calm and appears to be in control, even though they may feel kind of churning and unsteady inside, is generally the person who turns out to be the better leader. And that's just through significant research that has been done. And I think it's a very important point for you to remember. Are you a leader who is wise? Do you just go into the rational and not so much thinking about the emotional? Do you get very upset and distressed in front of your people? And then they think, well, they can't actually follow you because you're the one who they're trying to help. Or are you somebody who is wise? Even though, as I said, you might feel a little bit, put out and a little bit unsure, are you a leader who's able to be wise and calm? She or he who remains calm in the face of adversity will always win. I've been saying this for 25 years, ladies and gentlemen. I say this all the time. I can give you so many examples. What's one? Okay, so one from my personal life. My mother's 84. My mother and I were driving down a road probably about 6 months ago, one of the busy roads in Sydney, and there's a side road that kind of comes into it. And it's like Seagull Island, I think they call it, but the car can come in, park there stationary, wait until the cars have gone, and then go into the flow of the traffic. Anyway, I was coming towards the Seagull, and I saw this person coming into the Seagull area. I kept going because he had to stop. But he didn't stop. He just kept going. And he basically rammed into us, and he hit us, and the car sort of swerved around. And my mother, God bless her, was absolutely hysterical. And I remember sitting in the chair, in the driver's chair, just saying to her, Mum, calm. Just stay calm. It's okay. None of us are dead. We're right. Take a breath. And I sort of took her through this 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, breathing. And I was quite surprised at my own response because I'm not always calm. I mean, I'm human and I'm not always calm. I was as calm as a cucumber. Drove the car off the road, went to go and see this driver, and his comment to me was, I just didn't see you. And I said to him, how did you not see us? We were absolutely in front of you. You could not have missed us. Anyway, that was just one example. There's another very interesting case study, which I always tell about the fallen balcony. A friend of mine had a 50th birthday party. This was about 5 years ago. And she had about, I would say, probably 80 people at the party. It was a lovely evening. It was November. It was warm. And we were all outside on the balcony and chatting and drinking, and as you do. And I was sort of on the far end of the balcony, just sort of overlooking the garden. And it was the most amazing experience ever. The balcony, obviously the pylons or the posts under the balcony had not been structured sufficiently or well enough by an engineer, that what happened was one half of the balcony just fell. So I was the first to go. The party owner or the person having the party was the second to fall, and a third person fell on top of me. And what was interesting was the other people kind of just slid down and were able to literally slide down and remain standing and walk away. But 3 of us were hurt. What was interesting in the story around calm in the face of adversity was I was just winded and the woman whose part it was who fell down next to me, her I think it was her ankle was absolutely shattered, and her leg, the top of her leg was shattered. And the third person was just sort of very much kind of traumatized, but she was fine. The reason I tell you the story is that the woman whose part it was unbelievable in this chaos. People were crying and people were screaming, and she just lay there in agony, and she just held this entire crisis together. And she just said, can you please stop crying unless you hurt? Can you please stop making it sound as if you're in agony? I want all of the people who are hurt to go and stand on this side of the garden. She called her husband and she said to him, just go and call the ambulance. Calmly, he called the ambulance. She said to all the people who were upset, okay, just sit on this side of the garden. She asked everybody who was fine and unhurt, okay, could you look after those people who had been hurt? She was exemplary in this absolute crisis. This crisis actually made it into the newspapers, so some of you might recall it. And the reason I share this with you is that I have never seen anybody so cool and calm in the face of adversity. She handled this entire crisis calmly, and everybody, surprisingly, just did exactly what she said to do. And so what was a crisis was just very, very well handled, to the extent that when the ambulance arrived, they knew exactly where she was. There'd been a pathway made for her. And she just, even when she was in the ambulance, she was still telling orders about who had to do what. And eventually they closed the ambulance door and took her away. But a great example of how to stay calm. So even now in COVID-19, stay calm. Just breathe, because nothing you are going to do is going to change what is happening. It's how you deal with it that's important. So I wanted to talk to you about what is agile leadership. So agile leadership essentially is the ability to be that, just agile, to be able to move, to be able to change direction, to be able to think about what you can be doing. So being, I guess, more flexible would be the way that I would talk about. And what we talk about, what do agile leaders do? They establish highly performing teams. I said that to you in the beginning, and I hope really that if you think about all of the teams that you are leading, if you do lead teams, would you say that your teams are highly performing? Or would you say that you've still got Bob and Joan who really just don't perform well? Think about it. I mean, think about that right now. If you've got a team, so out of 10, let's say, 10 is a fantastic team and 1 is really a team that struggles. Where would you put your teams, ladies and gentlemen? Is your team one that's really kind of autonomous? They can do what they want to you. They know what they're supposed to do. They're very engaged. They're very collaborative. They're very productive. Or do you have a lot of gossip and a lot of talking and a lot of backbiting, which would be a 1? Where do your teams stand? What we know from the studies is that any team, an optimal size is 5 to 9, but doesn't have to be. Some of us have much larger teams. And so we still need to try and make them as highly performing as we possibly can. What we also talk about agile leadership is the ability to shape the environment. And I'll show you the slide next that talks about agile environments. But it's really up to the leader to shape an environment for the team that enables them to be as successful as they possibly can be, and to encourage them to focus on what they're supposed to be doing. One of my key things is always about coaching your people. I know that it's not something that most executives do, although many of them will tell me it's what they should be doing and want to do but don't do. And really coaching your people ties into establishing highly performing teams. So the more you actually help them look at what they do well and celebrate that, but also more importantly, get them to highlight what they don't do well and what you don't think that they don't do well, and then design an individual development plan with them and for them that they follow so that they can actually start to improve. Now, some people might call this supervision, some call it coaching. I actually think they're different things. So I'm going to focus on coaching now, which is about actually establishing areas for improvement for your people so that to make sure that they can start becoming much more effective in the things that they don't do well. It's a monthly one-on-one where you get together with them, you provide training, you provide opportunities for them to grow in the areas that they don't do very well in. But what we don't do is necessarily have one-on-ones every month with our team members. And if we don't, then how on earth are we going to establish highly performing teams? So I believe, having done this for so long, that high-performing teams and coaching people go hand in hand. I think also agile leaders are those who lead organizational change. So many times I see leaders who do the same thing all the time. You know, one of the key things, one of the major things in a 5-stage leadership, I think, process is to challenge the process. And yet so many managers and so many leaders I deal with still do what they've always done because they've always done it, so they keep doing what they've always done. The really exemplary leaders that we come across or we coach or we train are those who learn how to look at what they're doing and then think about how they can do things much better and differently. And those are the leaders who lead the organizational change. And the organizational change leaders are those who are always exemplary. They are people who will hit the high income level, they hit the C-suites of organizations because they're agile, they're able to move, they're flexible, they're able to think about things that need to be improved. They see the importance of their people and they see the importance of training and coaching their people. And so who would be an agile leader today? Undoubtedly Richard Branson. He would be the epitome of an agile leader. So I think it's an important thing to think about agile leadership. And are you an agile leader in this COVID-19 disaster? Can you move? Are you flexible? So when we look at what an agile person might look like, you've got business leaders, technical leaders, and you've got essentially, these are all people, what we call agile teams in an agile ozone layer. So the leaders and the technical leaders are people who create an environment for their teams that enables them to perform to their best. So for example, they don't have to get involved in organizational politics. They don't have to get involved in organizational issues that don't affect them or it's not necessary for them to be involved in. So the exemplary and the agile leader creates a zone, an ozone layer, if you like, for their people that just keeps them focused on what they're supposed to do in a collaborative and a really sort of harmonious way. And the kind of things that they actually sort of are focusing on is what they call dependent waterfall teams. And so they're trying to keep away teams that fall apart at any space or any opportunity. They're trying to keep them away from the traditional sort of teams or groups or those kind of issues where the traditional team that only comes to work and does their own thing and doesn't do anything else. You know, what we talk about now is a multi-skilled team, multi-skilled organizations, where you've got people from one team who are quite capable of moving into another team, and you're starting to create a highly performing team that has multi-skills and are able to do different things. And if you're able to do that, you've got a much better chance of having more agile teams. So the centralized quality groups, the functional silos. Oh my gosh, the silos drive me crazy. When I go into organizations and sales doesn't talk to marketing, who really hates operations. If you find organizations or teams like that, you're talking about bureaucracy. You're talking about egos. And that's never, ever going to be something that's going to be of very, very high value or regard in any organization moving forward, or certainly in times of crisis like this. And I mean, obviously, the bureaucracy, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really good little visual for you to see that the really great agile leaders are those who are able to create a ozone layer for their people where they can really, really collaborate and work well together. So flexibility in your team or in your leadership or your team is flexible leaders adapt to changes as they come. They revise their plans to incorporate innovations and overcome challenges. They still are able to achieve their goals. A flexible company will look for ways to find something that works more efficiently than what you already have. And that comes back to what I was saying just now, is that a flexible leader or an agile leader is one who's able to look at, you know what, we've been running this campaign the same way for the last 5 years. We have used the same people, the same process, the same products, and we do a good job, but could we do it better? Is there another way that we can work more efficiently than what we're already doing? And one of the key things I always say here is that the leaders don't need to come up with the answers to that, ladies and gentlemen. The real people who have to work out what to do more efficiently are the people who are in the jobs. Because as a leader, you don't necessarily know the job as well as the person who works for you. So why would you come up with a different way of doing that job if they do? There's a really large company we're working with in Fiji at the moment, and we're doing exactly this. So there are 20 leaders, and we've divided them into 4 project groups, and one of the project groups is looking at ways that the organization can do things more efficiently and more effectively. And so they're actually looking at every single solitary thing that teams are doing, even in things like, onboarding, retention, induction, the way that the machines are used, the time and motion study. And some of the stuff that they've come up with is unbelievable. There's one area in the organization where they've come up with it. If they did it this way, i.e. a different way, they can save the organization up to 3 million Fijian dollars a year. Now, 3 million Fijian dollars a year is about 2 million Australian dollars. That's a lot of money. And the reason why I share that with you is that it was only when they realized that it's actually about leading teams and thinking about how we can do things better and smarter and faster and not harder, that they're starting to realize that they can be much more productive and much more effective and much more efficient in any stages, whether it's crisis like COVID-19 or just in their general way of being, their general way of leading. And I guess the question to you then is, do you look at your team and think, I'm sure we could do this better or smarter? Or do you always do what you do because you've always done what you've always done, so you keep doing it? Just something to think about. Has COVID-19 changed the way we think about our work? Now, certainly it has had to have some impact on the way we think about our work because we're now at home, right? There are some organizations, I'm just thinking about a foster care organization we work with, where you've got children in foster care and they have to work, they have to be on the front line. So COVID-19 has certainly affected them in terms of dangerous and, being on the front line, etc. But they can't really work from home because their work is actually in the community. But for the majority of people, COVID-19 has changed the way that we work, i.e. lots of us are at home. And, are we using more Zooms and more Skypes and more webinars, or are we scrambling to work out how we can do this better? And I think the real thing I want you to think about is, has it changed the way we think about our work yet, or is it still changing the way we think about our work? And the reason I ask you that is because if we don't think about how COVID-19 has changed the way we work, or we will be working in the future, we are in danger of becoming extinct. Because I suggest that more of this is what we will be doing in the future, based on, as I said when I started, bushfires and floods and crises. Who knows what else we are going to face in the future? And I think the more agile and the more remote and the more capable and flexible the workforce, but the more highly performing, as I said as well, I think the better off we will be as organizations and leaders overall. Different personality types of leaders. So what works best in a crisis? I love this part of the work that I do because I think personality types are absolutely important and so interesting. So I'm showing you the work here based on Myers-Briggs. Love Myers-Briggs as a tool. And there's 4 distinct areas of Myers-Briggs, or scales as they call them. So extroversion. So if you've got a pen and paper, for those of you who don't know much about this, I'm going to give you a quick little introduction. And then I'll obviously take it back to the types of leaders in a crisis. So extroversion looks at those leaders who tend to be, more talkative. They tend to be able to say what they think. They are more vocal in the way that they work. They're more vocal in the way that they think. So if something worries an extrovert, you'll generally know about it. Whereas an introvert tends to be a leader or a team member who's quieter. So they tend to not always contribute, but they're often deep in thought. And so they are often people who provide really good answers to problems. Now, the reason I'm sharing this with you is that it doesn't mean that because introverts are often the people who provide good answers to problems because they think about it, extroverts do it just as well. They just do it differently. So I think that this is a very important thing to say. You'll see a middle line down this particular table, and the middle line in the Myers-Briggs normally is a naught. And at the end of it, so at the end of the left-hand side of extroversion, sensate, thinking, or judging, would be 60, 60, 60, 60. And to the right-hand side of introversion, intuitive, feeling, and perceiving would also be 60, 60, 60. So the 60 is the highest score you can get, and 0 is obviously the middle line lowest score. So you can be anywhere on that scale. Obviously, if you're a 60 or 59, it means that those behaviors are very dominant for you. So leadership personalities in a crisis, I'm going to go through all 4 of these pretty quickly and get you to have an understanding of maybe where you sit and how this might affect you and the way that you work when you are in a crisis. So extrovert versus introvert leaders in crisis. So what I left this open because I wanted us to just talk a little bit more about this. An extroverted leader is a leader who, as I said earlier, tends to talk more, or if they think about something, they'll share it on the spot, or if something's worrying them, they'll talk about it. So extrovert leaders generally are leaders who are easier to read. You'll know what's going on with them because they talk about it. They're easier to get an understanding of where they're coming from. In a crisis, often it's easier because they're easier to read, as I've just described, and you'll be able to know what they're thinking, and they'll be able to tell you what they're thinking. So, in a crisis, like as I explained with the balcony, the party owner was an extrovert, so she was able to tell people what to do, when to do it, although she was a calm extrovert. An introverted leader is, as I said earlier, a leader who tends to be more thoughtful, who tends to think things through and then talk. And now just be mindful, as I said earlier, neither are better than the other, ladies and gentlemen. They can be equally as critically important in a crisis as the other. In fact, in many ways, a combination of both is best. So let me explain to you what I mean by that. Introverted leaders are those who think things through and tend to then talk. Extroverted leaders are people who tend to think and talk at the same time, if you like. I mean, obviously, I'm describing in a very simplistic way. It is obviously a little bit more complicated than this, but I'm just explaining it to you simplistically. So what we're really looking for is you as a leader who actually spends a bit of time thinking about what to do, and then makes the decision and says to their team, right, this is what we're going to do. So I've decided this, I've decided that, and this is how we're going to handle this problem. You might, for example, ask some of your team for their contributions, always good for staff engagement. What do you think we should do, or how do you think we should handle this? The more you ask your staff, the more you engage them, the more committed they will be. So I'm saying that overall, it would be great to have a combination of extrovert and introvert. Introvert to think what would work, how could this work, what would be the best way forward. So you have some idea in your mind of a way forward. You might even take a piece of paper and kind of map out what you think would work. After, as I said earlier, asking your people what they think would work. And then you make a firm decision, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing worse than an indecisive leader. You make a decision, you tell your people, and you execute. So you have a combination of introverted thinking, strategizing, what am I going to do, and extroversion, right, this is what we're going to do. You share it with the troops, and you let them know what it is that you're going to do. If you are somebody who tends to be very extroverted, I ask you to just stop a little while and think first, have your strategy clear, and then talk. If you are a very introverted person as a leader, I ask you to have your strategy thought out, which you would have, but then stand up and stand out and say, right, this is what we're going to do. And by the way, some of the best leaders in the world have been very introverted people. And I always give this as examples. Obama, introverted. Elvis Presley, introverted. Nelson Mandela, introverted. So you can have some very, very powerful leaders who are introverted people who do actually stand up and then discuss it with their troops, what they're going to do moving forward. Extroverted leaders are easier to read. As I said, introverted leaders tend to be quieter as they think things through. Both can be equally effective in a crisis. So just think about that and work out where you think you sit or stand. So extroverted or introverted leaders in a crisis, as I said, it could be either, as long as you're able to do both. Sensate versus intuitive leaders in a crisis. Sensate are people who are very detail focused, and intuitives are people who are big picture. So sensate are people who want to, go down to the details, the nuts, the bolts, dot the I's, cross the T's. Often, for example, in leadership are your finance directors, your bookkeepers, your accountants. They want the detail, whereas your intuitives are people who are visuals. They're forward-thinking leaders, and let's do that, and let's try this strategy, and let's do this. And again, it comes back to what I said earlier. When in a crisis, we basically need to be both. We need to sit back and think, right, what are the details here? What must I not forget? What's critically important to remember that I need to actually have under control in this crisis? So it might be, for example, one of the organizations we're working with is they are funded by the government. So one of the things they have to do is remain open and productive to keep their funding. So that is what we call a sensate job. They've got to keep working on how they're going to remain productive and efficient, but keep the funding going, because if they don't have the funding, they've got nothing. But in the intuitive space, the CEO and I are talking about what he can do differently moving forward, how he can actually, get his people to move and work from a much more remote situation moving forward, but at the same time keeping the business going. So it's a bit of both. Keep your eye on the detail, never ever lose sight of the detail, but never just focus on the detail, because you also need to have a bigger picture as to where you're going to take your people and what does the future hold for you and the people who work for you and with you. So sensate versus intuitive, you need the details, you need the structure, but you also need the bigger picture of where we're going and how we're going to get there. Your thinking versus your feeling leaders in a crisis. Thinkers are people, leaders who are very good at decisions, are very good at cause and effect. So 1 and 1 is 2, A plus B equals C. So logical, rational people, they think very logically. So, and often what's interesting in this is that you'll find people who fall into this way of being, choosing or falling into categories of careers. So what's an example? Thinkers are people who would be doctors, surgeons, accountants, finance directors, anesthetists, bookkeepers. 1 and 1 equals 2. So if there's a problem, there's only X, Y, Z ways that, or X, Y, Z solutions to the problem, and they'll start to discard 1 and 1 and 1 until they eventually find a solution. So generally they think with their head. Your feelers are leaders who tend to think with their heart. So they generally focus on relationships very much. They value values, respect, integrity, all those kind of things. They're compassionate. They feel for their people. I noticed, for example, which was very interesting, that the CEO of Qantas and the board all took not a pay cut, but they're not being paid until the end of the financial year, which I thought was absolutely miraculous and very lovely. And that would be both a thinking leader and a feeling leader, thinking that we've got to ride out this particular crisis, but feeling that if I don't take the salary that I'm paid, then my people or some of my people can stay. I think it's also interesting, one of my friends who's a thinker said to me, yes, well, imagine how much they are paid if they're able not to be paid every month until the end of the financial year. And I'm sure some of you on the line are thinking that as well. But never mind, they still took that pay hit. So a thinking leader is right. What's the most rational for my people in this crisis? What do we have to do? What logical, rational things do we have to look after? What's the best thing to keep my business going in this crisis? Right, feeling is, so how can I best look after my people? How can I best look after my clients and the people who rely on us? And what are the things that I as a leader need to do to make sure that we look after both? And again, so if you are more thinking and more logical and more rational, be mindful to also be more feeling and think about things. An example I was told the other day or the other month I remember was So, it's Christmas time and the company hasn't done very well. So the CEO says, well, the last 10 in are the first 10 out. So that's a thinking leader. Logic says, well, the last 10 in must be the first out because that's how we have to, fund our business. But a feeling leader would say, no, let's all take a pay cut at this time called Christmas so that we can all have a turkey and the children can have a present. So you can see where the difference is, ladies and gentlemen. I'm saying that in a crisis, you need both. Think the logical things about your business. You might have to actually put people down. I'm not suggesting that you don't, but also make sure that you remember the compassionate part of your role and the compassionate part of your business, because if you don't think about your business, which generally is about people, you don't have a business. The judging versus perceiving leaders in a crisis is interesting. I won't stay here too long. I'm just very aware of the time. But the judging versus perceiving, I don't like the word judging, but it's not my word, so I'll use it. Judging is basically, the judging people, J's we call them, are people who are very structured, very orderly, very tidy. A person who's a high J will never lose things. They've always put their keys back on the key rack. They never run out of fuel. Oh my gosh, never. They always, they'll never run out of food because they make lists. This is a classic indication. They make lists. So if they're going to the shop, they make a list of coffee and tea and spinach or whatever, and they go around the shops and they tick, tick, tick their lists. So if you're one of those people and generally are a high J, i.e. moving towards the 60, as I said, you are somebody who generally has things under control. The P leader is somebody who's much more laissez-faire, or the P team member, much more laissez-faire. She'll be right, mate. No worries. They get things done. There's no differentiation on that, but often they'll do things at the last moment. So I'm a J. When I did my degree, my assessment was always in a week before. My sister, who's 18 months older than me, also a psychologist, she would literally hand her assessment in 2 minutes before it went in. That's a P. She always did better than I did, by the way, but never mind. Last minute and very much more relaxed. And so the J is looking at the structure of the business. What do we need to make sure we've got done? Have we got everything we need? Have we checked off the lists? Are we making sure we forgot something? But then move forward, not in an absolutely agitated and anxious way all the time. Just relax with it a little and know and trust that you've done the right thing and hope for the best moving forward. So again, in terms of personalities, if you do tend to be more J, get your things in order and then relax a little. People don't want to follow an uptight, anxious leader who's constantly fretting. It's exhausting, and neither do they want to follow a she'll be right, we'll get there eventually leader. They want to follow somebody who has got a plan. They want to know that the person they're following knows what they're doing, but they're also following somebody who says, listen, let's just ride this out together. It will be okay in the end, and we will come through this as a united organization. And then you've got your J and your P. So again, it's fine to have one as more as dominant, which I would be a J. I find it hard to be a P, but I am trying, and I think I'm getting better at it. So think about that as a leader in crisis. So 3 ways to be a flexible leader. I think this is also pretty important. Flexible is, if you're a J, flexible is a bit hard, but we can learn to be more flexible. So look for creative ways to work, and remain open to change. It's not always that something has to be done one way. We can do things differently. And I'll give you an example. One of the things I found so difficult is I used to dip in and out of my emails all the time. Well, what a waste of productivity that is. And I had a time management specialist come to me and she said to me, you're just wasting your time. And I said, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. And she taught me, unless it's really urgent, do not respond to your emails any other time than between 4 and 5 at night. And I've got much better at that. And I used to think, what a strange thing. But actually, what I've noticed is that I get so much more done in the day. So I don't dip in and out of emails where I'm distracted and then my thought process is taken here and then I'm not doing something there. It's really interesting to be able to, focus on one thing at a time. And then my emails generally are done at the end of the day. And I feel that it's a much more creative way to work. And I feel that it's much more agile. and are less disrupted plans, and I seem to be less thrown by unexpected circumstances. I seem to be calmer because maybe I'm thinking more calmly, and that's what I'm asking you to do. So my one son wants me to do something with him, and my daughter wants me to do something with her, and my mum needs help with this. And I'm sure all of you understand this. And I'm thinking, oh my God, all these people want something from me. And I remember just saying, you know what? Okay. Take a deep breath in. Right. And I remember getting up off my desk, off my chair, and saying to everybody, right, I'm going to deal with one thing first. So my mother was most important, dealt with her. Spent an hour with her, right? You came, Mom, you good? Yep, fine. Second thing is, right, I said to my son, right, now what do you need? So the point I'm making is just do one thing at a time. Adapt. Be agile. Because life isn't always going to go the way that we want it to go. So just adapt your style to fit things, realizing that not everything fits neatly into our little corporate policy or even our little plan for the day. How often do we get up and say, right, I'm going to do these 17 things today, yeehaw, and by the time the end of the day comes, we realize we've done not one of them. And then we think to ourselves, we actually have wasted our day. I don't ever believe we waste our day. I think maybe we could learn to be better at time management. I think we can certainly learn to be better at not being so distracted, as the example I gave you with only doing emails from 4 to 5. I think we can be much better at the way that we structure our work. One of the things I find is that I just don't go into the office some mornings because I know that if I stay at home, and I'm fairly disciplined when I'm working from home, so there's no television ever, there's no shows on TV, nothing like that. I'm very disciplined, but I find I get a lot more done, and then I might go into the office at 12 o'clock realizing I've done so much that I needed to do. Right, now what do my people need from me, and how do I actually help them throughout the day? So if you take that Monday or you take that Friday, and it's absolutely fine to do that because it might be that you need to do that to be able to fit things in, because when you get to work and it's all on, I think it sometimes just eats at our time. So think about that, and think about this for your people. Can you encourage them to work from home one morning a week to be more productive in exactly the same way that you are? And this flexibility that I'm talking about is actually then very relevant to COVID-19, because this is where we are. One of the key things I think that some of the executives that we're talking to at the moment are struggling with is, are my people being productive? Well, my question to that is, well, are they doing what you ask them to do? I mean, are you measuring what they're doing? Are you monitoring what they're doing? Are their reports in on time, or are their phone calls, up to scratch, or are they providing what it is that they need to provide in their daily role if they were at work? And some might say to me, well, no, not really. Well, then they're not being productive at home. Others are saying, yes, I'm getting what I'm needing on time. Well, then they're being productive. So I think the other thing here, ladies and gentlemen, is remember that most of your people may not be used to working from home. So it's new for them too. It's new for them to try and navigate this whole new world that's coming from COVID-19. And I think to be disciplined at home is something that we don't all do well, to work from home. And I think we need to learn how to do that. We need to be more structured. We need to be more time managing, all the things I've spoken to you about. And I think sometimes people don't know if they have never worked from home. So how would they know unless you teach them how to do that? So what can we learn from COVID-19? What can we learn? We can learn that things have changed. We can learn, I don't believe that the world will ever be the same again. We can learn that this crisis is sent to us for whatever reason, critical and tragic as it is, as the bushfires were, that we need to find a new way. We need to be more agile as leaders, as teams, as organizations. We need to be more flexible and agile as organizations as we possibly can. We need to think about how we can live in a really, really effective way, but taking into account that the world is no longer the same. And it might mean that we've got to teach our people how to work from home productively. It might mean that we've got to actually start using technology much more effectively than we ever have. It might mean that we've got to actually think about being more flexible and agile as a leader, so that when we have another crisis or another difficulty, we can just swing into things that we already know because we've put those things in place. Because I think the world will never be the same. And you know, who knows what comes after COVID-19? None of us know. And I guess the most important thing then is, how can we help you through this crisis? We are coaching many senior executives through this tough time. Some of you are on the line today because I can see who's on the line. And it might mean that you just need some coaching for an hour or two, a particular problem, a particular distraction. You've got something that's really worrying you. We're coaching all the time, so we are here if you need help. We're at our desks and we're working with people. So anytime you need help, we can help you with the reports. We can help you with an analysis of the COVID impact if you feel that that would be very helpful for you, how it's impacted your business, how it's helped your business, how it's affected your business, generate a business case for team growth and development for you if you like what will we, or what have we, or what can we learn from this for our organization, what strategy are we going to use moving forward, actually to strategize that and to put that into a business plan in such a way that we've got it down pat, that should this happen again, this is exactly what we're going to do. We can help you with that if you would like. We can help you with a strategic roadmap, marketing plans, strategic plans. Well, same with us. We are doing a lot of training, essentially, coaching, guiding, counseling, but we're using technology because even though we do a lot of face-to-face training and development, we can't do that anymore. We've been doing Zoom and flexible learning for a long time. We do some online. And so I suppose on some level, we've already introduced flexibility into our working, but we know from a lot of our clients that they don't necessarily like it. Some would rather prefer phone conversations, some would prefer Skypes or webinars because at least you can see each other. But there's other ways that we can work, and other ways, as I've been saying to you all morning, that you can work so that you can keep your business going, and we're very, very happy to help you. So general guidance for you or your people through this crisis. So we're here, let us help you. I think the last thing I wanted to say about this is, I think if you are leading a team and you're feeling a bit lost and feeling a bit rough and feeling a little bit out of sorts or confused, and you just need somebody to bounce off your ideas or bounce off your thoughts about, we're here. So we can do that with the absolute pleasure and to just basically put you back on track if you're really struggling. We'd be very happy to do that. So if you would like to book in a no obligation call to discuss your biggest challenge you're facing, we're very happy to do that. Please feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. That is my LinkedIn profile number, or just find me, or you can email me, Karen@puremagicbusiness.com.au. Anything you'd like to discuss, anything you'd like to talk about, any help you would need, we really are here to be here for you, and we will continue to be. So are there any questions that you would like to put out this morning, or anything you would like to know, anything that you feel upset about or you find difficult, anything at all? What would you like us to help you with? Okay, so one of the questions I have here from Sam, thank you Sam, is when are we available? Well, we're available most days unless we're coaching other people or working with clients, but just give me a call or send me an email. There the email address is. Very, very happy to help you at any time. Another call here from Max. Max is asking us, how will you know if your people are struggling during this time? Generally, again, coming back to some of the things I was talking about earlier, was the issue of the introvert and the extrovert. Extroverts are easier to read. So if you've got extrovert staff, if they're upset or if they're unsure or if they're feeling kind of out of sorts, you'll know. It's more your introverted staff who might be more difficult to read because they're generally quieter. So you might say to them, how are you going? I'm fine, thanks. Or anything I can help with you? No, thanks. All I generally say is watch the change in behavior. Even though they're obviously working from home, but when you ring them, if you do ring them, just get a flavor or feel for how they're talking. Do they sound upbeat? Do they sound okay? Or you could even be as honest in saying, I'm not sure that you're okay, or I'm not feeling that you're okay. Can you just tell me a little bit about how you're going? You know, just check in with them and tune in with them, because if you don't see them, it's harder to obviously understand or even recognize what might be going on, and it's even more difficult then. But it's always easy if you are able to ask them, tell them, I don't know if you're okay, and I'm worried if you're not okay, so I need you to tell me honestly how you're going. And I think just an honest and open chat with them will be absolutely fabulous. So that's what I would do. All right, so I'm just aware that it is, oh heavens, almost 10 past 11. I want to really thank you for being on the line. It's been fantastic to be with you all. Thank you for your time, and I really look forward to speaking with you next week. We're talking about, I think it's resilience next week, so look forward to that. In the meantime, stay safe, ladies and gentlemen. We look forward to hearing from you. Take care and God bless.